Ron Bottitta. Ron, I was calling the wrong number yesterday. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, it's close enough. It's Bottitta. Yeah.
By any name, you're giving one of an incredible performance as the father in Fatherland. I was talking with Brett Oberman, and I said, I don't think he's an actor. I think that the director went to an American Legion hall and grabbed the first worker coming in and said, "You play this part."
Well,
and then I found out you're from England. So
yeah, it's a little more complicated than that, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's a good guess. So
it's extraordinary. Here's what I want to ask you. Actors play parts, and they play all sorts of difficult parts. Anthony Hopkins was Hannibal Lecter, certainly a despicable person. Tony Perkins played Norman Bates in Psycho, but there's something different about your playing the father in this because he's right in our face. He's today. And so what happens to you, the actor, playing a man who is of our time, of our moment?
Well, I've actually played quite a few like real life characters in my past, and I think you talked about Hannibal Lecter and Perkins' character in Psycho, but I mean these are obviously horrible villains. But I don't see this person as a horrible villain. I mean some of his actions were reprehensible, but he's very human, and within the context of his play, it's not my job to play. I mean, it's my job to stand up for my character and to make him as human and as fully realized as possible. And I'm his advocate, and not only his avatar, but his advocate. And it's up to the audience to figure out at the end of the play whether they support my character or whether they support my son's character, or whether in fact they support Donald Trump or whoever it is they support. The lines that I've been given are every single line, every single word that I say in this play was actually said by my character. So I have that sort of ammunition in the sense that I can stand behind all of these lines. It's not as someone's idea of who this character is. It is actually the character speaking. So
he's now doing federal time. I think he's doing 6 years. Did you have a chance to meet him?
No, I didn't. I had a chance to meet obviously Jackson Reffett, who was the actual son in the case, and we had some great talks about his dad and aspects of his dad and who his dad is. I've heard his dad's voice on tape. And I informed that to sort of figure out the dialect that I was going to use for this. And, in a lot of ways, we have a lot in common. I mean, we're both, he and I both say inappropriate things at inappropriate times. And, we like to be loved by people around us. And, so I felt a lot of kinship with this guy. I mean, obviously the choices that he made, I would never make, but I can, from the foundation of who he is, I think we've got a sort of shared, perhaps, antipathy towards authority, antipathy towards government, and sort of built out from there.
He has a name. In the play you're called Father, but he's... Is he Jackson Reffett? Is that the father or the son? The Jackson is the son, and who's the father?
My character's name was Guy Reffett, or is Guy Reffett.
Guy. In the second act, he has a speech that is it's the voice of Mega. It's the of who we are and what we represent. I think that's what's so chilling about your performance is that it's we have an election coming up, and this is the voice of what it's about. Do you? I think what I'm asking you as an actor, a man, what do you carry away with that, or do you carry away with it?
Well, is the speech you're referring to the speech at the end where he warns about the future?
Yeah. Well, he said at one point, he said, we had guns before. This next time we'll use them.
Yeah.
That speech.
Yeah, that was actually a speech he made. I mean, he's unrepentant. He's pretty secure in his views. And he says in this part of the play, we had thousands of weapons on January 6th and fired no rounds. And next time we will not be so cordial. It's throwing down the gauntlet, basically. That's where he is. He can't do very much in prison where he is, but he knows what he believes. And he's got a vast support network of people who, support the what they call the J6 hostages, who feel that these people are political prisoners, and rather than some, a bunch of older guys who got into some cosplay. I mean, they felt that their way of life and their status was threatened, and this is their way of what they consider, like Trump considers themselves to be fighting back, as opposed to provoking or taking the lead, if you will. You know what I mean?
Has anyone in the audience shouted out at you, or people afterwards indicate that they're either angry at you or supportive of you or of the character you're playing?
Well, most people, I think, who come to see it, afterwards, when I've spoken to them, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you're not at all like the person who's played."
You're human.
I was ready to deal with this sort of monster, this brash, loud monster. And but we did have one. There's a speech in the play where I talk about dragging Nancy Pelosi out of the Capitol building by her ankles. And when we did it in Los Angeles, because we had a 5-month sold-out run in Los Angeles, the Fountain Theater, before we came here. And we had someone actually cheer when that line was sent out there. So there are people in the audience, I think, who have their sympathies elsewhere, who are perhaps keeping them under wraps. I know that there have been people who have come to see the play who just disapproved of what they considered as message. And it's very strange because in a couple of things they amplified on Facebook with people commenting, and one person says, "Oh, this play was terrible. It's just a liberal pablum," and said the acting was terrible, the script was terrible. And on just a slight further investigation, where I just get involved and I just start asking leading questions, they hadn't actually read the script nor seen the play, but it's very on brand just to jump on board and say, "Well, this is just a very simplistic depiction of these people." Well, it really isn't. I don't think it is.
Well, but Fatherland is, in fact, Mr. Scrooge, who wrote it and directed it, said this is the transcript. This is verbatim of what was said. So it's not liberal pablum.
Well, but obviously you and I know that, but that's people who hear about the play. They immediately make it. Some people who have certain political affiliations just assume the play is going to be about one thing, when actually the core of it is a father-son story, and the core of it is the split between the father and son because they are both committed to act on their political beliefs, and it just gets out of hand.
Which leads me to two questions. One is the son did come here for the New York presentation. He didn't see it in California.
He did not.
When you talk with him, what's your reaction to him?
Well, he's a very, very sweet kid. I mean, I'm saying sweet kid. He's 22. That sort of shows how old I am. But
well, he is a kid.
He's a lovely guy, and his dad taught him well. His dad taught him to stand up for what he believes. And he's lived his life that way. I mean, he was in a job where they were being treated badly, and he organized the place to strike with a few demands. So he's basically a local organizer, one might say agitator, for in the same way that his father was. Like his father taught him almost too well, or that they're from the same tree. He's a very, very honest, very straightforward guy. And I think at some level, he wanted the feds to get involved to head off his father at the pass before he could do all this stuff. to try and protect his father. But because of a structural delay in the FBI getting back to him, his father was already at the protest on January 6th when the FBI got in contact with him. So now it became about turning his father in for what he'd done, as opposed to preventing his father from actually doing this stuff. And
they're estranged now. Did he indicate that there's any efforts for them to reconcile? Or is that possible?
There hasn't been. I think he wants to reconcile with his dad in the way that most people do, want to reconcile with a parent who has opposing political views and who perceives having been done wrong. I'm sorry, I got lost in that thought, but there hasn't yet been that sort of thing. He's talking with his sisters occasionally through text, and as I understand it, he's not talking to his mom very much either, because his mom's come down on his father's side and is actually a fairly prominent speaker on the militia sort of anti-government January 6th circuit. So that has,
of course, I'm sure you read the New York Times editorial saying that Trump has divided families, using this family as a prime example of the division.
I mean, it's happened on a lesser scale, less with few. Not that the scale of it has been lesser in terms of antipathy between father and son, but this sort of plays out in a larger sense that people have gone to jail because of their disagreements. But I think it's happening all over the country.
Have you discussed with him, Guy, the father, the character you're playing in Fatherland, says, I brought you into this world, I could take you out of it. I don't know if those are the exact words. Under what circumstances did Guy say that to Jackson?
When he suspects that his son is, it's when the FBI started to clamp down after the last couple of weeks of January. And he suspects his son of actually recording the phone calls, which at that moment his son is not recording, but he has been. So he suspects his son of recording him. He says, you've got to choose a side. Don't betray this family. Don't ruin this family. Don't put this family in jeopardy. And putting the blame on his son for destroying the family if he turns in recordings of his dad, as opposed to owning the behavior he's done for the past year or so. So,
Ron, playing Guy, he's with you, he's part of your life right now, and for the length of the run of this play. If you met him, are there questions you would ask that are unanswered from the script, or that you've had to figure out who you play him? I mean, he comes to life. When I saw it, you were Ron. It was that simple. But you're not. You're an actor playing him. So if you met him, what questions would you pose to him?
Well, I would be very interested in what his turning points were, because he started off as a fairly middle-of-the-road guy. I mean, basically traditionally conservative. He was a self-made man. He's worked his way up through the oil business, and then it was the decline in the price of oil that really affected his career. And he'd been sort of planning, as many Americans do, that when on an economy that's constantly expanding, and we tend to not plan too much for when the stuff hits the fan. So we get maxed out on credit cards, and, even though we're doing better, we're sort of outstripping how well we're doing by living just slightly beyond our means. So when the crash came, it hit him very hard. And I would be interested to see where along the way he became radicalized. Like, what were the things that just caught his eye and said, yeah, I believe that. I really believe this conspiracy theory, or I've turned the corner into believing this. Where do you start seeking violent overthrow instead of just sort of muttering under your breath?
As I said at the beginning, I was stunned when I learned that you were English. I thought you were born and bred in Indiana or Iowa.
Thank you. I'm not sure how much that says for my Texas accent, but thank you.
Well, I'm wondering though, as being you came to this country when you were a grown person. Do you think being English or being not born and raised in America that you come to the character with a different perspective, not being born and raised here, a sort of a neutrality?
I have a very everyone has a very complicated story, but my complicated story was that I was adopted in England by a dad who was actually worked in the oil business. He was from Brooklyn, New York, and that's where I get Bottitta from. It's a Sicilian name, and it's gone through Brooklyn. But we lived after I was adopted, we lived in England, and my adopted mom was Dutch. So there was always this sense of observing other cultures, being aware of the way other people speak, being aware of very different cultures, like growing up in a small village in England, but then going to Brooklyn for the vacations or going to Amsterdam, a town just north of Amsterdam, and speaking Dutch and being considered Dutch and also being considered sort of from Brooklyn by my English friends, and then being considered English by my Brooklyn friends. My Brooklyn family, it was all very a bit.
Well, that's what the world has become, of course.
But yeah,
but you were not. At first, when Bert Oberman told me that you were English, I said, "My God, he's a Shakespearean actor." But you were not theater trained in England.
I wasn't. No, I came over to the States to go to college, and I had no idea. Because I sort of blew it the last 2 years in high school in England. I went to a private high school in Wimbledon, and I'm not sure that I applied myself very hard. So I didn't do very well in my final exams, and that's what you pretty much need to do to get to college in England. So I did a few various things. I worked as a motorcycle messenger in London for a year, and then I realized that I wanted to go to college somewhere. And since I had connections, I had the ability to go to the States because my father had got me a green card when I was young. I ended up going to Berkeley and doing a degree in history there. And I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I'd done a bunch of acting at Berkeley, but then I applied to NYU, to Tisch School of the Arts for grad school. And I got in there, and that pretty much made the decision for me because it was very against the odds to get in. And when I did, I thought, okay, maybe they're seeing something in me, so I might as well pursue that. So I've sort of been doing theater ever since the 80s.
But Ron, your accent is decidedly English. It's not the Brooklyn heritage is not in evidence. So at what point did someone said this English sounding? Pardon me?
Yeah, I'm trying to sound classy, but listen, when I'm talking to other people, sometimes it comes out like that,
At what point did someone saying this man with an English accent should play this quintessential American, and who had the vision to see you playing that? Well, how did you even have the audacity to audition for it?
Well, actually, I didn't audition for it, but I very rarely play English people now. I play lots of foreigners. I play Scots and Australians and South Africans and a lot of Russians, Americans, because I generally, that's my thing. I do dialects. But for this particular project, because I do theater constantly in LA, I do projects back to back or overlapping sometimes because that's kind of actor I like to be. I like to do theater. All the other stuff is basically just for money. But I hadn't done any jobs at all at the Fountain Theatre until about 3 years ago. I've now been acting in LA theater scene for 20 years, 25 years. So they saw me for I went in, they offered me a role in a play called The Children by Lucy Kirkwood, where I did play an English guy. And then the following season, they asked me to play the American writer in Lifespan of a Fact, their production there, and I did that. And then they called me again and said that Stephen had put this play together. Would I be interested in playing this character? And I read the script, and you can imagine how quickly I jumped at that. So,
Well, had Stephen Sachs, the director, seen you in any, was this his company?
Yeah, I've known Stephen we've been aware of each other around LA theater for decades. But,
so he didn't say this English guy can play this quintessential American. He knew what you could do on stage.
Yeah, he'd seen me play American characters and various old grumpy people before, so he thought that might be a nice fit. So yeah, it turned out.
Well, I have a theater question that has nothing to do with that. As a theater goer, I'm constantly amazed and impressed with English actors assuming American characters, doing it so well. Do American actors go to London and assume English characters with the same proficiency?
I think so. I'm not really up on the English theater scene, but my experience in film is that American actors are far better at doing British accents than British actors are doing American accents. I think that it works both ways, but I think it works. I'm never sort of worried when Americans do English accents. They all seem to do them really well, the ones I've seen. So it never. Every time it leaks out of
is this your first? I'm sorry.
No, I saw True West in London a few years ago, and for some reason they played these guys with Brooklyn accents, which I thought was particularly odd. But, who might say?
Is this your first New York stage appearance?
No, when I got out of NYU in the late 80s, I got involved with the Irish Rep, one of my first shows out. It was actually Irish Rep's first show.
On 22nd Street.
Well, they are now. We used to be in a basement. No, we really were in a basement around there somewhere. And I was in two shows their first season, and then we had one show called Whistle in the Dark, moved to Off-Broadway, and I did Shakespeare in the Park 3 times, just playing. When you get out of NYU or Juilliard or Yale or one of those schools, it's basically a ritual to get drafted into some medieval army and carry a spear and props for the summer, and try to avoid the tip of your spear being hit by lightning when it rains.
So final question about Fatherland. You did it in L.A. and you did it in New York. Is there a difference? Is the audience response different in the two cities?
Yeah, when we did it in L.A., we were completely sold out for 5 months. And it was in a very compact 80-seat theater, and every night felt like an event because, when a house is sold out and you're in a small space, it has a buzz to it. So there was that element that we haven't quite found yet here because it's a bigger theater, and it takes a bit more oomph to sell the place out. We've got close, but not that close. So there's that element. But what's great is that the woman who was the actual U.S. attorney who's depicted in the play came and saw us in L.A. and she turned Stephen onto a tranche of further primary source documents, and he incorporated those and wrote a few more scenes into the play, which really flesh out the father and son relationship and highlight the high points in their relationship before Dad sort of went off in a different direction. And those are, it took us a while to incorporate those new pages, and we had to unlearn cues and basically had to unlearn certain ways that the characters were being played because they had a different arc. But we had a few days, a week or so to incorporate all that. So it's basically a new play that we're doing here as opposed to one we did in L.A. And that's very exciting.
Yeah, well, I think I know you have 2 performances today, so you have to save the instrument, the larynx. I thank you not only for the time this morning, but for one of the most remarkable performances that I can remember seeing. I didn't.
Oh, that's very
I have to tell you that at the end, the audience was standing and cheering, and I couldn't move. I didn't stand up. I was. I don't know what the emotion was, but I was overwhelmed. And much of it was because of your performance. And I thank you for giving me that theatrically and also frightening me to death. The play is Fatherland. We're talking to the father, Ron Bottitta. And thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.